And may have heard me from time to time talk about the new Confederacy. We're still back on the Civil War, and if we're to look at that, the American Civil War from perspective of leftists, we're to believe that it was Republicans who were fighting to be able to continue to hold slaves. That, of course, was not true. We're also supposed to look back sometimes at the Civil War and say we should erase or remove from public view any statues that honored any of the Confederate generals because they were evil, horrible people across the board. They didn't have any reason for fighting for the Confederacy beyond slavery, when in fact many of them wrote about the fact that they wanted slavery to end, that they wanted the South to remain free states. And yes, I stood on the side, or would have, I think, of wanting slavery to end. I would pray I would be that. I know I am now, and yet there's slavery all over the world, particularly in countries that happen to be run by the partners in the new Confederacy in the United States. See, the partners in the new Confederacy in the United States, they still run slave operations in their countries like Somalia. Muslims still hold slaves. It's still part of the culture. And again, I will say it, and I know it annoys some people, not all Muslims. As a Christian, I should say that. I should make sure to say that. So what do I mean by the new Confederacy? I mean that we are watching a partnership between some radical Islamists and some Islamists who have been brought here with scam in hand. What do I mean scam in hand? I mean they have a franchise model for how to defraud American taxpayers. And why am I saying it's a franchise model? Because it's replicable. There's steps to this. You come in and you get in as a so-called refugee. Then you get payment for that. You come in with, say, 3 or 4 wives. You make sure that one of them has a job at a place like Walmart. So you get some extra coverage for some of your kids. Then you make sure that you get signed up on assistance for everybody. Then you go up and set up a business, say a grocery store, a small grocery store, which happens to be right next door to a restaurant you also get. And you use, in that grocery store, you use EBT cards that your 5 wives or 4 wives who are not working at Walmart get. You use that to purchase food from your own restaurant, or from your own grocery store, to then go into your own restaurant to cook. In other words, you're getting free product from the taxpayers, bringing it over to your restaurant, cooking it, and charging customers for it. There's very often cases where then next door to all these things in these strip malls, there is a place where you care for kids, a daycare center that also happens to take federal monies. It just happens that you're paying your wives who don't work at Walmart to care for your own kids. It's a kit. And when this is being called out as fraud, then President Trump's team is calling it out as fraud, and they're in now doing deportations. You have people like Ilhan Omar coming out and saying, we don't care what ICE says, the Somalians will never leave. You have Ilhan Omar stating out front that she's here to build a Somali power base. You have people who are Somalians using fraud to fund presidential campaigns in Somalia, including creating their own militias. It's a new confederacy. It becomes a confederacy when states like Washington and Maine and Minnesota refuse to allow the federal government to look into the SNAP databases so that they could fight the fraud. They refuse to do that. It becomes a confederacy when they also partner to protect, to refuse any form of law enforcement. So let's go through a couple of these things. This is a former TSA agent who saw some interesting things coming out of the Minneapolis-St. Paul International Airport.
I saw suitcases filled with millions of dollars of cash, and the couriers were always Somali men traveling in pairs. And they got through the checkpoint. It just really absolutely blew my mind the first time you open a suitcase and you see millions of dollars of cash. And typically what would happen is a Leo or a law enforcement officer would come, check their credentials. I don't know what kind of questions they asked them, but their IDs were always documented, and probably their plane tickets as well. So there is a trail of that out there. And I would believe with all the cameras at the airport that if they started there, they could probably find each and every individual that brought money through the checkpoint.
It comes from Alpha News. Liz Collins reports. So we are expatriating our own monies in cash, which would eventually become traceable to a point, but then untraceable, disappearing into the ether of Somalia, wherever they're taking this. And we have governors who are supporting this because the Somali power base they're building happens to be on the Democrat side. Because Democrats are uniquely willing to burn America down so that they can rule over the burned down America. That's one example. This is another one. Now, this is just someone just coming flat out, and I give him credit, by the way, for not lying about how he views Islam in America. He's a Palestinian Islamic scholar in Chicago, where his name is Mohammed Nusrat. And at least he's being honest about his view of Islam and immigration as a what exactly? Listen to this.
We can't think of Islam that it came to live with these other religions in the sense that Islam is a religion amongst those religions, and they have a share with the truth. And they have a share of justice. And they have a share of, this worship of Allah, the correct worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Islam came to correct all of that. Islam came to remove the oppression of all those religions, and it is the only truth, and it is the only way to justice.
Now, on one end, you'd be right to come to me and say, wait a minute, you're an evangelical Christian. You contend that Jesus Christ is the way, the truth, and the life, and no one goes to the Father but through him, so it's the only true faith. Yes, you're right. That's what the Bible says, and I know it to be true. And unless I'm missing something, there's no fraud kit Christians are given to go into other nations to steal from them in order to fund things like militias in Somalia. As near as I can tell, there's been no removal of Romans 13 from the Bible, which is a really hard one for conservatives because we are to obey the laws of the land. We are to obey princes and magistrates and the laws of the land, because God himself created governments to govern over us. Unless that involves violating the word of God. In which case, in the very early days of after Christ went back to heaven, you had Peter and John taken before a council of technocratic religious authorities, the Pharisees, and they were flogged. They said, we should kill him. But a wise man came to them. He was also a Pharisee. He said, hey, guys, if this is a fake religion, it's going to die away like all the other fake religions have. But if these guys truly are of God, because they're doing signs and wonders, Peter and John have been given the ability to raise from the dead and perform signs and wonders and miracles. They are doing these things. And if it happens that they come from God and you kill them, you could be picking a fight with God. So you'd be right to say, but this Muslim scholar, all he's saying is the same thing from his perspective. Correct. But we're not using immigration as a weapon. Christians aren't organized in this sense. We are not out being, as Christians, overthrowing governments. The CIA does. USAID does. There's no doubt that we've caused a lot of the problems in the Middle East. There's no doubt that we want to destabilize the Middle East. There's no doubt that there's some reasons for them to be angry with us. And that's a different conversation. Because the American Confederacy, the new Confederacy that's being built, has gotten to an unbelievably obvious point and dangerous point where you can't say it's no longer a civil war. You can't say it's not a civil war any longer because there's now declared signs, government against government. What was the Civil War? The federal government against some state governments. It became a declared war. Back in the day when we used to declare wars. Government against government. We're in this place now. And it's not just on the topic of immigration, but this is the most clear case. But if you need some other examples, you've got now these 13 or 14 states that have set up the Democrat Health Alliance. They refuse now all of a sudden to follow federal government guidance on the shots. You've got some states now that are pro-kidnapping states where they'll allow your kids to be kidnapped for medical so-called transitioning, and other states don't want that. So there's lots of lines drawn, but never more clear than when it comes to immigration enforcement. This is the Minneapolis police chief. And the Minneapolis police chief, and it's been confirmed, they're not going to respond to ICE officers asking for help. In fact, and I should have pulled this video, there's videos and audio of ICE being hung up on. CPB, Customs Border Patrol, calling the local police, hey, we need some help. We're being attacked. They hang up on them. This is the so-called police chief announcing a civil war, government against government.
It's especially personal to me, having been raised a Catholic, to be in a Christian church this morning as we are approaching Christmas. And I cannot help but think of what is happening in our city today and how that echoes with how outsiders have been treated for thousands of years, how Mary and Joseph themselves were considered outsiders and forced to stay in a barn.
Okay, I don't like to call people blatant, blooming, babbling idiots. So I will not call this police chief a blatant, blooming, babbling idiot. Mary and Joseph were following the law. They were to go be counted as census. Everybody had to do it. They were maybe late because Mary was, pregnant. So they're not going to help ICE, government against government. That is a civil war. Do you think that with all of this happening, it might be time to have an expert take a free, no obligation look at your retirement plan? Because I don't know that your retirement plan was set up for an America undergoing the casual declaration of a civil war. We, the Minneapolis Police Department, will refuse to rescue federal officers even if they're being shot at. Yeah, it's time. My friend Zach Abraham will do this for free. 3 no-obligation consultations. First one, do you guys like each other? Second one, what do you expect out of retirement? Third one, can he help you or not? He'll make that very, very clear. And if he thinks you're in a good place, he'll tell you to stay put. If he can help you, he'll tell you how and give you a plan. It's free, no obligation. Just go to knowyourriskpodcast.com. That's knowyourriskpodcast.com. Investment advisory services are through Trek Financial LLC and SEC registered investment advisor. Investments involve risk and are not guaranteed. Past performance doesn't guarantee future results. Trek 25-338. And just keep this in mind. We are to be kind to the sojourners, but we can kindly deport people.